Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm Sam Sachs. It's Friday, but the news is flying in like a pack of winged monkeys. I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. I've never even been to Kansas. And we begin with massive news out of the International Criminal Court, which announced arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The court also issued an arrest warrant for Hamas's military commander, Mohammed Daif. The actions against Netanyahu and Gallant mark the first time any international legal body has moved to prosecute a close ally of the United States and most of Western Europe. Quite an accomplishment there for Joe Biden's foreign policy. Anyway, several countries now find themselves in a bind as both signatories to the Rome Statute, which created the ICC, and aiders and abettors to the genocide now being prosecuted by that ICC. I'm looking at countries like Germany and the United Kingdom. In its decision released this week, the ICC rejected appeals by Israel challenging the jurisdiction of the court. The ICC then laid out its findings against the apartheid state. Quote, "The chamber considered that there are reasonable grounds to believe that both individuals, Netanyahu and Gallant, intentionally and knowingly deprived the civilian population in Gaza of objects indispensable to their survival, including food, water, and medicine and medical supplies, as well as fuel and electricity, from at least October 8th, 2023 to May 20th, 2024. The chamber therefore found reasonable grounds to believe that Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare." The ICC goes on to add, quote, "The chamber assessed that there are reasonable grounds to believe that Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Gallant bear criminal responsibility as civilian superiors for the war crime of intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population of Gaza." Now, as you'd expect, the news wasn't taken very well in Israel or the United States, where members of the Biden administration now ought to be concerned about their own legal exposure to the ICC's case. Netanyahu accused the court of being anti-Semitic, ignoring the fact that Hamas's military chief also had an arrest warrant issued against him, and that Netanyahu is the first ever Jewish person indicted by the court in its more than 20-year history. In a statement, President Biden said that the ICC's actions were outrageous and said that the U.S. will stand with Israel. And here was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre speaking to reporters.
We fundamentally reject the court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israel officials. We remain deeply concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek arrest warrants and the troubling process errors that led to this decision. The United States has been clear that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over this matter. You've heard us say this before.
Yeah, not even bothering to refute the charges laid out by the ICC against Israel. The White House is instead just troubled by process errors and a lack of jurisdiction, since Israel is not a member of the ICC. Although the White House had no problem with the court's jurisdiction when it issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, even though Russia is also not a member of the ICC. In that instance, Joe Biden claimed the court was justified. Republicans in the U.S. are taking an even more aggressive posture to the ICC. Senator Tom Cotton said in a tweet, quote, "The ICC is a kangaroo court and Kareem Khan is a deranged fanatic. Woe to him and anyone who tries to enforce these outlaw warrants. Let me give them all a friendly reminder. The American law on the ICC is known as the Hague Invasion Act for a reason. Think about it." Well, I thought about it, and it sure sounds like you're threatening to invade Holland, sir. Add that to the list of countries Trump might bomb in his second term. Now, the immediate upshot of the ICC warrants is they're going to restrain Netanyahu and Gallant's summer travel plans. Doubt the two will be visiting Europe anytime soon. More than 120 countries are signatories to the ICC and are thus obligated to execute arrest warrants on its behalf should targets arrive within their borders. And already, a number of countries have said they plan to abide by those orders, including France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, Italy, and Canada. The mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, Abdullah Hammoud, also said his city would arrest Netanyahu and Gallant if they pass through. He wrote on Twitter, quote, "Other cities should declare the same. Our president may not take action, but city leaders can ensure Netanyahu and other war criminals are not welcome to travel freely across these United States." I'm not entirely sure the mayor can do that, but I respect the gusto. Meanwhile, just as the ICC was moving against Israel's genocidal government, lawmakers in the U.S. passed a bill that will empower the Trump administration to go after the very same groups that have been protesting against Israel's genocide. The U.S. House passed the controversial Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act that allows the Treasury Secretary to, without supplying any evidence, strip the tax-exempt status from nonprofit groups deemed to support terrorists. Obviously, this will lead to the targeting of pro-Palestinian solidarity groups at first, and then other left-wing organizations later. In fact, as Lever News reported, Republicans are simultaneously plotting to attack climate advocacy nonprofits, too. Despite how obviously dangerous this legislation is, particularly with a vengeful president set to take office, 15 House Democrats joined Republicans to help the bill pass. They included the usual suspects like Henry Cuellar, Jared Moskowitz, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Also voting in favor of the bill, Washington State's hipster Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, or as she ought to be referred to based on her voting record in Congress so far, Joe Manchin with bangs. Good news! The workers building the cars of the future are unionizing. A supermajority of them at a battery plant in Glendale, Kentucky called Blue Oval SK announced this week that they had signed union authorization cards. They'll be joining the United Auto Workers, which, under pugnacious leader Shawn Fain, has been making gains organizing in the South and at electric vehicle battery plants. Blue Oval SK, or BOSK, currently employs about 750 workers, but once it's fully operational, it will hire thousands more. It's a joint venture between Ford and a South Korean auto company. Last year, the UAW went on strike against Ford, GM, and Stellantis, securing higher wages for workers. And in a press release, the UAW noted the wage discrepancy now with non-union plants and how that was a motivation behind the organizing campaign. UAW members starting at Ford make about $5 an hour more on average than non-union workers starting at BOSK. This year, battery workers at Ultium Cells in Lordstown, Ohio, and Spring Hill, Tennessee joined the union, giving the UAW a foothold in electric vehicle production within General Motors, too. Now, at this point, management at BOSK could just recognize the union, but it probably won't, so it'll be up to the NLRB to schedule an election. Kentucky's Democratic Governor Andy Beshear encouraged the company to remain neutral during the process. That's actually refreshing given the scorched earth approach other Southern governors have taken toward organizing campaigns in their states. Back in May, the UAW lost an election at a Mercedes plant in Alabama after a supermajority of workers declared an intent to join. What followed was an all-out effort by business interests and conservative political leaders to crush the union. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey issued a joint statement with 5 other Southern Republican governors that claimed unions were socialists that threaten jobs and, quote, the values we live by. Paying workers less than their worth is not a value, Governor. At least it's not one that's worth preserving. Matt Gaetz is out. Trump's attorney general nominee spent the week meeting with senators, some of whom he had probably shown pictures of his own dick to. Ultimately, Gaetz decided the support just wasn't there, and he withdrew his name from consideration, claiming that his nomination had become a distraction. He also stepped back amid a flurry of leaks from the DOJ investigation into him, including a diagram showing that he paid thousands of dollars to teenage girls in public Venmo transactions. Also, news of a second sexual encounter with an underage girl. Gaetz' nomination did delay the release of the House Ethics Committee report into him, though that panel is scheduled to meet again next month, so we'll see if he can ultimately dodge the report altogether. Either way, enough people know this guy's a creep. Within hours of Gaetz dropping out, Trump had already moved on and named Pam Bondi as his next attorney general nominee. She served in the same role at the state level in Florida, where she was infamous for hijinks such as holding fundraisers with Scientologists, and one time she convinced then Governor Rick Scott to delay the execution of Marshall Lee Gore, not out of compassion, but because the execution conflicted with another one of Bondi's fundraising events. Now, anyone who was desperate to believe that the Gaetz pick might mean Trump would embrace populist antitrust action to break up big businesses — Gaetz, after all, was one of the few Republican supporters of FTC Chair Lina Khan's trust-busting agenda — anyone who believed that should be crushed by the Bondi pick. She's currently a corporate lobbyist working for some of the biggest businesses out there. That includes, according to New York Times reporter Ken Vogel, companies like Amazon, General Motors, and Uber. But just like the rest of the cabinet, Bondi does have the main qualification: loyalty to the president. She was part of Trump's defense team during his Senate impeachment trial, the first one in 2019. She also did a brief stint as a guest host on Fox News' The Five, so she also checks the having been seen on conservative TV box as well. Looking forward to the day we won't have to do this anymore because the nation's oligarchs have been rounded up and banished to a floating barge off the coast of Florida. But alas, that day has not yet come, so we still have work to do. And this week's rich dick is Rahm Emanuel. Emanuel is a centrist neoliberal who represents everything the Democratic Party has done wrong over the last decade and a half. And yet, his name is now being floated to lead the party as the next chair of the Democratic National Committee. Former Obama campaign manager David Axelrod suggested that Emanuel is the best guy to turn the party around. Yes, turn it around 360 degrees and head it in the same losing direction even faster. Axelrod and Emanuel served together during President Obama's first term. Emanuel was the chief of staff. And one of the great failures of the Obama years was, despite his own talents for getting reelected, Obama presided over years of Democratic Party losses around the country that saw his majorities in Congress shrink and Democratic strongholds in state legislatures disappear. And some of the blame for that falls on Emanuel, who moderated and undercut Obama's agenda. Ahead of the disastrous midterms in 2010, Emanuel ditched the White House to become mayor of Chicago, where he covered up the police murder of Laquan McDonald and clashed with the city's teachers union. He left office after 2 terms with a dismal approval rating in the 20s. For getting his next gig in government, Rahm turned his focus to growing his personal wealth, raking in almost $13 million in consulting fees to corporations and making the rounds on the public speaking circuit. That's according to the Chicago Sun-Times. When Biden was elected in 2020, he sent Emanuel to Japan to be the next U.S. ambassador. And According to new reporting from the American Prospect, Emanuel has been growing his bag there too, including by what appears to be illicit means. The outlet reported on suspicious stock trades Emanuel has made while serving as ambassador, trades that sure look like they were conducted based on inside information. They include a purchase of between $250,000 and $500,000 worth of stock in an AI and cloud computing company called CoreWeave. That trade was made at the end of September in 2023, precisely one day before the Japanese government announced hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies for computer chip components that would benefit CoreWeave. Prospect noted, quote, as CoreWeave steers toward an IPO, its last funding round in May saw its stock price jump over 425%, suggesting Rahm made at least $1 million off a single trade. The outlet also flags suspiciously timed trades made by Emanuel in a Chicago lending firm and a data analytics company. When it comes to Rahm, it's hard to tell if his neoliberal shilling reflects a genuine political belief or just his strategy to make as much money as possible. Like during the Medicare for All debate within the Democratic Party in 2019 and 2020, Emanuel positioned himself firmly against the idea. He went on TV to lecture Democrats against embracing the policy, and he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post calling it a pipe dream. At no point during this crusade did Emanuel disclose that he was working as an advisor to pharmaceutical companies opposed to Medicare for All. Rahm has also spoken out against the Green New Deal and free college programs. So, if Democrats want to pick a new party leader that will chase the Republicans to the right and pursue a path of political demise catering exclusively to a dwindling upper middle class and wealthy electorate, then yeah, Rahm is your guy. And maybe that's for the best. I know a lot of people think we're in the midst of a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, but I don't think that. I've given up on the idea that the party can be a vehicle for working class liberation, so honestly, I couldn't care less what Democrats do at this point. Let them have Rahm Emanuel, a rich dick who will cater to other rich dicks. Let them bury their own brand further underground. It'll make our task of building something new easier. All right, friends, the show ends today with a sunrise from Washington, D.C. It was sent in by Joshua on H Street. Enjoy. Thank you, Joshua. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.